The research vessel Endeavour moved slowly through the dark space of the Kepler sector, far from any human colony or military base. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair and watched the stars pass by on the main screen. He had been commanding the ship for 3 years now, and most of that time had been quiet and peaceful. The Endeavour was not a warship. It carried scientists and engineers who studied stars and planets and the strange things that existed in deep space. 42 people lived and worked on this vessel, and Jake knew every one of them by name. Dr. Lisa Hayes ran the biology section and was always excited about finding new forms of life. Engineer Paul Chen kept the engines running smoothly and could fix almost anything that broke. Communications officer Amy Watson was the youngest member of the crew at 23 years old, but she was smart and good at her job. These were good people doing important work, and Jake felt proud to lead them. The ship's sensors had detected an unusual energy reading near a small moon 3 days ago, so they had come to investigate. Lisa and her team thought it might be some kind of organic energy source, maybe even a new type of life. Paul had checked all the equipment twice to make sure everything worked perfectly. Amy had sent regular reports back to Earth Command, letting them know where they were and what they were studying. Everything was normal and routine, just like it had been for months. Jake had no reason to think this day would be different from any other. The first warning came from the sensor station. Lieutenant Kevin Price looked up from his console with a confused expression on his face. 6 large objects had just appeared on the screens, materializing out of quantum space less than 50,000 kilometers away. Jake leaned forward in his chair. No one was supposed to be in this sector. The Kepler region was far from any shipping lanes or settled systems. Before Kevin could identify the objects, the ship's computer started screaming warnings. Weapons locks, multiple hostile targets, shields were being targeted by weapon systems. Jake's mouth went dry. He hit the alert button and opened communications across all channels. The 6 ships were Kralton warships. Jake recognized their design from the intelligence briefings he had read. The Kralton were raiders and pirates who attacked weak targets and took what they wanted. They were aggressive and violent, and they had been causing problems along the outer rim of human space for years. But the Endeavour was deep in unexplored territory, nowhere near Kralton space. Why were they here? Why were their weapons already charged and locked onto his ship? Jake tried to hail them, to ask them what they wanted, to tell them his ship was unarmed and carried only scientists. The Kralton commander did not respond with words. He responded with weapons fire. The first blast hit the Endeavour's shields and made the whole ship shake. Red lights flashed across every console on the bridge. Amy screamed and grabbed her chair to keep from falling. Kevin shouted that the shields were down to 60%. Jake ordered evasive maneuvers, but he knew it was hopeless. The Endeavour was built for research, not combat. It could not outrun warships, and it had only basic defensive weapons that were meant to destroy asteroids and debris, not fight off an attack. A second blast hit them, then a third. The shields collapsed completely. The next shot tore through the hull near the engine section. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Jake could hear explosions in the distance, feel the deck shaking under his feet. His people were dying, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Jake managed to activate the emergency beacon, sending out a distress signal that would tell Earth what had happened here. He included the sensor logs that showed the Kralton ships and their unprovoked attack. Maybe someone would find this data someday. Maybe someone would know what happened to the Endeavour and her crew. Another explosion rocked the bridge, and Kevin's console exploded in a shower of sparks. The young lieutenant was thrown backward and did not get up. Smoke filled the air. The main screen went dark. Jake could hear Amy crying somewhere behind him. He turned to tell her it would be okay, to comfort her somehow, but he did not get the chance. The Kralton were boarding the ship. The raiders moved through the corridors of the dying vessel like hunters. They wore heavy armor and carried powerful weapons. They shot anyone they encountered without hesitation or mercy. In the biology section, Dr. Lisa Hayes tried to shield her research team with her own body when the Kralton burst through the door. She died instantly along with 4 other scientists. In the engine room, Paul Chen worked frantically to seal a bulkhead and save the people trapped in the aft section. He managed to close the door just before the Kralton reached him. The raiders shot him down, but the people he saved survived for a few more minutes, trapped but alive. One by one, the crew of the Endeavour fell. Some fought back with tools and emergency weapons. Some tried to hide. Some simply stood their ground and faced their killers with dignity. None of it mattered. The Kralton showed no mercy and took no prisoners except for 7 people they dragged from various parts of the ship. Jake Morrison was one of the 7. He had been stunned by a Kralton weapon on the bridge and woke up in chains in the cargo hold of the lead warship. Amy Watson was there too, her face bruised and her uniform torn. So were 5 others from various departments. A medical officer named Chris Turner, 2 engineers, Sophie Grant and Danny White, a scientist called Henry Brooks, and a navigation specialist named Rachel Moore. All of them looked terrified and hurt. All of them were alive when 35 of their friends and colleagues were dead. Jake tried to speak to them, to organize them, to plan something, but the Kralton commander entered the cargo hold before he could say much. Thexlar was tall and covered in thick scales that looked like armor. His eyes were yellow and cold. He looked at the 7 humans like they were insects barely worth noticing. He spoke in heavily accented English, telling them they were prisoners now. They would be kept as trophies, proof of Kralton superiority over the weak humans who dared to explore space that belonged to stronger species. Thexlar said this attack was a message. Humans should stay in their own territory. They should stop expanding, stop exploring, stop thinking they had a right to travel where they wanted. The Kralton claimed this space now, and any human ships found here would be destroyed just like the Endeavor. Jake wanted to tell this monster that humanity would not accept this, that someone would come looking for them, that Earth would respond to the attack on a peaceful research vessel. But the words stuck in his throat. The Endeavor had been so far from home. The distress beacon might not even reach Earth for weeks or months. Even if it did, why would anyone follow them all the way out here? The Kralton were raiders who moved constantly, never staying in one place. By the time anyone received the distress call, Thexlar and his ships would be thousands of light years away. No one would pursue them that far. No one would spend the time and resources to hunt down raiders across the entire sector. That was what Thexlar believed. That was what every Kralton believed. They were wrong, but they would not learn that for a long time. Amy Watson had different thoughts running through her mind. When the Kralton had first dragged her from the bridge, she had felt the small tracking device built into her uniform collar. All crew members on exploration ships carried them, though most people forgot they were there. The devices were designed to help rescue teams find survivors if a ship was damaged or destroyed. Amy knew the device had limited range and would only work if someone was actively looking for the signal. But she activated it anyway, using a tiny switch hidden in the collar fabric. It was a desperate hope, a prayer thrown into the void. She did not really believe anyone would follow them across space. But she had to try. She had to do something. Even if it was pointless, even if no one ever came, she had to believe that humanity cared about its people. She had to believe they would not be forgotten. The distress beacon from the Endeavor traveled through space at the speed of light, carrying its terrible message across the vast darkness. It took 72 hours to reach the nearest communication relay station, and another 12 hours before it arrived at Earth Command headquarters. Admiral George Patterson was in his office reviewing supply reports when his assistant knocked on the door and told him something urgent had come through. The Admiral was 60 years old and had served in the military for almost 4 decades. He had seen combat, loss, and tragedy many times in his career. But when he sat down and watched the black box recording from the Endeavor, something cold and hard settled in his chest. The recording showed everything. It showed the peaceful research vessel going about its work, studying a small moon in an empty sector. It showed the 6 Kralton warships appearing without warning, weapons already charged. It showed Captain Morrison trying to communicate, trying to explain that his ship was unarmed and carried only scientists. The Kralton never responded. They simply opened fire. Patterson watched the Endeavor's shields fail, watched the hull breach, watched people die at their stations. He watched the Kralton board the ship and kill anyone they found. The recording ended with a clear image of the lead Kralton warship and its identification markings. Patterson sat in silence for a long moment after the video finished. Then he picked up his communicator and ordered an emergency meeting of the Human Defense Council within the hour. The council chamber filled quickly with military commanders, government officials, and defense specialists. Everyone had seen the recording by now. Everyone knew what had happened to the Endeavor and her crew. Some of the council members looked angry. Some looked sad. All of them looked determined. Among those present was Commander Helen Price, a woman in her early 40s who led the Long-Range Pursuit Division. This division had been created 2 years earlier, after several incidents where human ships had been attacked far from home. The idea was simple but radical. If someone attacked humans in deep space, a pursuit team would follow them no matter how far they ran or how long it took. The division's motto was written on a banner in their headquarters. "We remember, we return." So far, the division had only conducted 3 missions, all relatively short pursuits that ended within a few weeks. Nothing like what the Endeavor case would require. The debate in the council chamber was intense but brief. A few members argued for diplomatic channels, suggesting they should contact the Kralton government and demand the return of the prisoners. Admiral Patterson shut down this idea immediately. The Kralton had no central government. They operated in independent raiding clans that respected only strength and violence. Diplomacy had been tried before with Kralton raiders. It never worked. They would laugh at any diplomatic message and probably kill the prisoners just to prove they could. Another council member suggested a military strike against known Kralton bases. This idea had more support, but Commander Price spoke up against it. Attacking random Kralton settlements would not help the 7 prisoners. It would only start a larger war, and probably guarantee the captives would be executed. No, if they wanted to save those people and send a message that would actually matter, they needed to pursue the specific ships that had attacked the Endeavor. The vote was unanimous. Commander Price was given full authority to organize and lead a pursuit mission. Her orders were clear and simple. Find the Kralton ships that attacked the Endeavor. Recover the human prisoners if possible. Make sure every species in the galaxy understood what happened when you attacked defenseless human civilians. She would have unlimited access to resources, ships, and personnel. Time was not a factor. Whether it took weeks, months, or years did not matter. The pursuit would continue until the mission was complete. Patterson looked Price in the eye and told her something that would become famous in human military history. He said that humanity had tried being peaceful explorers and scientists. They had tried being good neighbors in the galaxy. But if other species mistook kindness for weakness, they needed to learn a hard lesson. Humans protected their own, and they never forgot. Within 3 days, Commander Price had assembled her task force. She chose 3 heavy cruisers for the mission. The first was called the Relentless, a name that perfectly captured the mission's purpose. The second was the Unforgetting, because humanity would never forget what happened to the Endeavor. The third was the Vindication, representing the justice they would bring to the raiders. 2 support vessels would accompany them, carrying extra fuel, supplies, and repair equipment for the long journey ahead. Finding crew members for the ships was remarkably easy. Price put out a call for volunteers and received over 2,000 applications within 24 hours. Many of the volunteers had personal connections to deep space exploration. Some had friends or family who worked on research vessels. Others simply believed in the mission's importance. Lieutenant Kyle Murphy was one of the first to volunteer. He was a tactical officer with an excellent service record and a sharp mind for strategy. He also had a personal reason for joining. His younger sister had been serving on the Endeavor as a junior science officer. Her name was not among the 7 prisoners, which meant she had died in the attack. Kyle did not talk much about his grief. He simply worked harder than anyone else, studying everything he could find about Kralton culture, tactics, and behavior. He wanted to understand how these raiders thought so he could predict where they would go and what they would do. Price noticed his dedication and made him her chief tactical advisor. Ensign Claire Foster was another volunteer who caught Price's attention. Claire was young, only 25, but she had exceptional skills in communications and signal analysis. She could find patterns in data that other people missed. She could track quantum signatures and energy trails that most sensors could not detect. Price assigned her to the communications station on the Relentless with specific orders to monitor every frequency and every signal they encountered. If there was any trace of the Kralton ships out there, Claire would find it. The fleet's departure from Earth was broadcast across all human colonies and stations. Millions of people watched as the 5 ships lifted away from the orbital docks and began their journey into deep space. Price stood on the bridge of the Relentless and looked at her crew. She knew this mission would test all of them in ways they could not imagine. They would be gone for months at minimum, possibly years. They would travel through unknown space, face hostile species, and chase an enemy that had every reason to hide. But she also knew her people were ready. She opened a ship-wide communication channel and spoke to everyone in the task force. She told them they were about to begin the longest pursuit mission in human history. The Kralton raiders thought they were safe. They thought distance would protect them. They thought humans would give up after a few weeks and go home. They were wrong about all of it. Price explained that humanity had a quality that made them different from other species in the galaxy. Humans were patient. Humans were stubborn. When someone hurt their people, humans did not forget, did not forgive, and did not stop until justice was done. The Endeavor's crew had been scientists and explorers, peaceful people doing important work. They had been murdered for no reason except that they were human, and they were in space the Kralton wanted to claim. That could not stand. It would not stand. Price's voice grew harder as she continued speaking. She told her crews they would follow the Kralton across the entire sector if necessary. They would check every system, every station, every planet where the raiders might have stopped. They would ask questions and gather information. They would be polite when possible and forceful when necessary. They would never give up and never turn back. The galaxy needed to see what humans were capable of when pushed too far. Other species needed to understand that attacking human civilians came with a price that would be paid no matter what. Distance meant nothing. Time meant nothing. Only the mission mattered. The tracking signal from Amy Watson's hidden device was faint and intermittent, but it gave them a starting point. The signal showed the Kralton ships had traveled in a specific direction after leaving the Endeavor's debris field. Price ordered her fleet to follow that course at maximum sustainable speed. They knew the raiders had at least 3 days head start, probably more. They knew the Kralton moved quickly and changed direction often to avoid pursuit. None of that mattered. The human fleet would follow every lead, investigate every possibility, and never stop searching. This was what the Long-Range Pursuit Division had been created to do. This was humanity's answer to those who thought they could attack human ships and disappear into the vastness of space. As the fleet jumped into quantum space and began the hunt, Price looked at the star charts and calculated the distance they might have to travel. It could be 10,000 light years. It could be 50,000. It could take them to the edge of explored space and beyond. She felt no doubt or hesitation. The Kralton had made their choice when they attacked the Endeavor. Now they would learn what that choice cost. Now they would discover that humanity's reach was longer than anyone imagined, and humanity's memory was eternal. The first week of the pursuit was frustrating and difficult. The quantum signature left by the Kralton warships was faint and kept disappearing completely for hours at a time. Commander Price ordered her fleet to spread out in a wide search pattern, covering as much space as possible while staying in communication range with each other. The Relentless took the center position while the Unforgetting and Vindication moved to the flanks. The two support vessels stayed back and monitored everything from a distance. Ensign Claire Foster spent 18 hours a day at her communication station, analyzing every piece of data that came through the sensors. She was looking for anything that might indicate where the Kralton had gone. A disruption in the background radiation, an unusual energy reading. Even the smallest clue could point them in the right direction. After 9 days of searching, Claire found something. It was a faint quantum distortion in a system 4 light years from their current position. The distortion matched the profile of Kralton jump drives. Price immediately ordered the fleet to that system. When they arrived, they found a small trading station orbiting a gas giant. The station was run by a species called the Vexer, reptilian merchants who traded with anyone who had credits to spend. Price sent Lieutenant Kyle Murphy and a security team to the station to ask questions. The Vexer station master was not cooperative at first. He said he did not keep records of every ship that passed through. He said asking questions about customers was bad for business. Murphy remained calm and polite. He explained that the human fleet was pursuing dangerous criminals who had murdered innocent people. He showed the station master images from the Endeavor's black box recording. The Vexer's expression changed when he saw the footage of unarmed scientists being killed in cold blood. He admitted that 6 Kralton warships had stopped at his station 5 days earlier. They had purchased fuel and supplies, then left heading toward the outer reaches. The outer reaches were a region of space far from any organized government or military presence. Pirates, smugglers, and raiders operated freely there because no one had the resources or willpower to patrol such a vast area. It was exactly the kind of place where Kralton would feel safe. Price thanked the Vexer station master for his help and gave him her contact information. She told him that if he heard anything else about the Kralton ships, He should send a message immediately. Then the human fleet departed and headed toward the outer reaches. The chase was on again. Weeks turned into months as the pursuit continued. The human fleet followed the Kralton Trail from system to system, always a few days behind but never losing the scent completely. They stopped at trading posts and mining colonies to ask questions and gather information. Most of the aliens they encountered had never seen humans before and were curious about these persistent pursuers. Some were helpful and shared what they knew. Others were suspicious or hostile and had to be persuaded more forcefully. Price made sure her people were always respectful but firm. They were not there to make friends or start fights. They were there to find the Kralton and rescue their people. Lieutenant Murphy became invaluable during this phase of the mission. He studied every piece of information they gathered about Kralton movements and behavior. He learned that Kralton raiders followed predictable patterns even though they tried to appear random. They preferred systems with weak defenses and valuable resources. They avoided areas where strong military forces operated. They stopped at certain types of stations for supplies and information. Murphy used this knowledge to predict where the Kralton might go next. Sometimes he was wrong, and the fleet wasted days searching empty systems. But more often he was right, and they found traces of the raiders they were hunting. 4 months into the pursuit, they received their first communication from another human ship. A cargo vessel called the Horizon had heard about the mission and wanted to help. The captain said his ship had been in the outer reaches 3 weeks earlier, and had heard rumors about Kralton raiders. Local merchants were talking about a group of Kralton warships that seemed nervous and jumpy, constantly looking over their shoulders like they were being followed. The Kralton were asking questions about human ships and whether anyone had seen pursuit fleets in the area. This news gave the human task force new energy and determination. The Kralton knew they were being hunted. The psychological pressure was working. 6 months after leaving Earth, the human fleet tracked the Kralton to a system called Drax. Intelligence reports suggested the raiders had stopped there 2 weeks earlier. When Price's ships arrived, they found a scene of horror. The Kralton had attacked a small mining colony on one of the system's moons. The colony had been home to about 200 people from various species. Most of them were dead now, killed when they refused to give the Kralton supplies without payment. The few survivors told Murphy and his team that the Kralton had seemed angry and desperate. They had talked about human ships following them and asked if anyone had seen pursuit fleets nearby. When the miners said they knew nothing about humans or pursuit fleets, the Kralton had attacked out of frustration. Price walked through the ruins of the mining colony and felt her resolve harden even more. The Kralton were not just running now. They were lashing out at innocent people because they were afraid. They knew the humans were coming but could not shake them off. Good. Let them be afraid. Let them understand what it felt like to be hunted. She ordered her ships to continue the pursuit with even more intensity. They would stop for nothing except the most essential repairs and resupply. Sleep schedules were adjusted so the fleet could keep moving 24 hours a day. Every crew member understood the urgency. Somewhere ahead of them, 7 human prisoners were still alive and waiting for rescue. Ensign Claire Foster made another breakthrough in the 7th month of pursuit. She had been monitoring subspace communications and detected a burst of encrypted Kralton military transmissions. She could not decode the messages, but she could track their origin point. The transmissions came from a sector called the Void Reaches, a notorious area where the worst criminals and raiders in the galaxy operated. Price studied the star charts and realized this made perfect sense. Thexler was heading for the one place where he thought he would be safe from human pursuit. The Void Reaches had no law, no order, and no one who would cooperate with authorities. It was the last refuge for those with nowhere else to go. The human fleet altered course immediately and pushed their engines harder than ever before. They were getting close now. The tracking signal from Amy Watson's device had grown stronger and more consistent over the past few days. They were finally catching up. Price could feel it in her bones. The hunt was entering its final phase. She called her senior officers together for a briefing and told them to prepare for combat. When they found the Kralton, there would be a fight. Thexler would not surrender peacefully. He would try to escape or try to use the prisoners as hostages. The human fleet needed to be ready for anything. Murphy spent 3 days planning the attack strategy. He studied the Void Reaches and identified the most likely places where the Kralton might hide. There were several dense nebulae in the region that would provide cover and limit sensor range. If Thexlar was smart, He would hide in one of those nebulae and wait for the humans to give up and go home. But Murphy knew something the Kralton commander did not understand. Humans did not give up. They did not turn back. They did not stop hunting until the hunt was over. Murphy proposed using the nebulae to their advantage. Instead of avoiding them, the human fleet would enter the densest nebula and use it to mask their approach. The Kralton would not see them coming until it was too late. 9 months after the attack on the Endeavour, the human fleet entered the Goran Nebula in the heart of the void reaches. The nebula was massive, stretching across several light-years and filled with gas, dust, and electromagnetic interference. Visibility was limited to just a few thousand kilometers. Sensors barely worked. Navigation required constant attention. But Claire Foster was picking up the tracking signal loud and clear now. Amy Watson's device was transmitting from somewhere deep inside the nebula. The Kralton were here. After traveling over 12,000 light-years through 40 different star systems, after asking questions at dozens of stations and colonies, after months of patient and relentless pursuit, the humans had finally cornered their prey. Price ordered the fleet to move slowly and carefully through the nebula. She did not want to alert the Kralton too early. Murphy coordinated the approach, positioning the 3 cruisers in a formation that would cut off any escape routes. The GEO support vessels deployed a special type of device that Murphy had requested from Earth Command months ago. These devices created quantum disruption fields that would prevent ships from jumping to faster-than-light speeds. Once activated, these fields would trap everyone in the nebula until the battle was over. Murphy spent 6 hours carefully placing the devices throughout the nebula while the Kralton remained unaware of their presence. When everything was ready, Commander Price opened a communication channel to her entire fleet. She told them this was the moment they had been working toward for 9 months. The Kralton who had murdered 35 innocent humans and taken 7 prisoners were just ahead of them. Those prisoners had survived months of captivity and were waiting for rescue. The crews of the Relentless, Unforgetting, and Vindication would not let them down. They would go in fast and hard, disable the Kralton ships without destroying them, and recover their people. Price's voice was steady and confident. She believed in her crews and their ability to complete this mission. The hunt was almost over, and soon the galaxy would understand what it meant to attack humanity. The human ships moved through the thick clouds of the Goran Nebula, like silent hunters closing in on their target. Commander Helen Price stood on the bridge of the Relentless and watched the sensor displays with intense focus. The 6 Kralton warships were less than 10,000 kilometers ahead, clustered together in a defensive formation. They had no idea the humans were so close. The nebula's interference masked the approach perfectly, just as Lieutenant Kyle Murphy had predicted. Price took a deep breath and gave the order. All 3 human cruisers activated their weapon systems and emerged from the cosmic fog with shields at maximum power. The Kralton reaction was immediate chaos. Alarms started blaring on their ships as their sensors suddenly detected 3 large warships appearing at close range. Thexler's command ship tried to move into a combat position, but his fleet was scattered and unprepared. The other 5 Kralton vessels scrambled to respond, some trying to form up for battle while others began charging their jump drives to escape. Price watched this confusion with cold satisfaction. The Kralton had been running for 9 months, always looking over their shoulders, never able to rest. The psychological strain was obvious in their poor coordination and panicked responses. Price opened a communication channel that broadcast to all 6 Kralton ships. Her voice was calm and clear without anger or emotion. She identified herself and her fleet. She stated that the Kralton were harboring 7 human prisoners taken from the research vessel Endeavour. She demanded the immediate surrender of those prisoners and the surrender of the Kralton crews to face justice for their crimes. This was their only warning. There would be no second chances and no negotiations. The Kralton had exactly 1 minute to respond before the human fleet would take action. Thexlar's response came quickly, and his voice carried a mixture of defiance and fear. He threatened to kill the prisoners if the humans attacked. He claimed the humans had no right to pursue his ships across the galaxy. He said the Kralton were simply defending territory that belonged to them. Price listened to this without expression. She had expected these exact arguments. She waited until Thexlar finished speaking, then responded with words that would be remembered across the galaxy for generations. She told him that if any harm came to the human prisoners, the pursuit would never end. The human fleet would hunt every single member of his crew across every system in known space. They would pursue his clan, his family, anyone connected to him. Distance would not protect them. Time would not save them. The humans would follow them forever until every last person responsible for the attack on the Endeavor had faced justice. The communication channel went silent. Thexlar did not respond immediately. Price counted down the seconds in her head. 30 seconds passed, 40, 50. Then her sensors officer reported something unexpected. 3 of the Kralton warships were breaking formation and moving away from the command ship. Their captains had made individual decisions to abandon Thexlar rather than face the consequences of his actions. They were trying to flee, willing to leave their commander behind to save themselves. Price ordered the Vindication to pursue those 3 ships but not to destroy them. She wanted them alive to stand trial. The other 2 human cruisers remained focused on Thexlar, and the 2 ships still loyal to him. Thexlar apparently realized his fleet was collapsing around him. He made a desperate decision and ordered a full attack on the Relentless, while simultaneously trying to activate his jump drive. The remaining loyal Kralton ships opened fire with everything they had. Energy weapons and missiles streaked across the space between the 2 fleets. The Relentless shook as several shots hit her shields, but the human ship had been built to withstand heavy combat. Her shields held. Price ordered return fire with specific instructions. Disable the engines and weapons, but do not destroy the ships. She wanted prisoners, not corpses. The human weapons were precise and devastating. While Kralton raiders relied on overwhelming firepower and aggression, human military technology focused on accuracy and control. The Relentless and Unforgetting targeted the engine sections of the Kralton ships with focused energy beams. Within 90 seconds, both of Thexlar's escort vessels were crippled and drifting. Their engines were destroyed and their weapon systems were offline. The command ship tried to maneuver away, but Ensign Claire Foster activated the quantum disruption field that Murphy had carefully positioned throughout the nebula hours earlier. The field generators powered up and created an interference pattern that made faster-than-light travel impossible. Thexlar's jump drive failed. He was trapped. The final phase of the battle lasted less than 3 minutes. Thexlar's ship fought desperately, firing every weapon and trying every evasive maneuver, but the outcome was never in doubt. The human cruisers worked together with perfect coordination, boxing in the Kralton command ship and systematically destroying its capabilities. First the engines, then the weapons, then the shields, finally the communications array. Thexlar's ship went dark and silent, floating helplessly in the nebula with no power and no way to escape or fight back. The Vindication reported similar success with the 3 ships that had tried to flee. All 6 Kralton warships were now disabled and ready for boarding. Price ordered Murphy to lead the boarding teams personally. She wanted her best tactical officer in charge of securing the prisoners. Murphy selected 20 Marines and security specialists for the operation. They armed themselves with non-lethal weapons when possible, designed to stun rather than kill. Price's orders were clear. Take the Kralton crews alive unless they posed an immediate deadly threat. Find the human prisoners and get them to safety. Secure all ships and prepare them for towing back to human space. Murphy acknowledged the orders and led his team to the transport shuttles. The boarding operation went smoothly on 5 of the 6 ships. The Kralton crews were demoralized and defeated. Most surrendered without resistance when armed humans came through the airlocks. A few tried to fight and were quickly stunned and restrained. Murphy went directly to Thexlar's command ship, knowing that was where the prisoners would be held. His team moved through the corridors with weapons ready, checking each compartment and section. They found the detention area near the center of the ship. Murphy personally cut through the locked door with a plasma torch. Inside the detention area, 7 humans looked up with expressions of shock and disbelief. They were thin and dirty, their uniforms torn and stained. All of them showed signs of malnutrition and abuse. 2 had obvious injuries that had not been treated properly, but they were alive. Captain Jake Morrison stood up slowly, his legs weak from months of poor conditions. He stared at Murphy's uniform and the American flag patch on his shoulder. He asked in a hoarse voice if this was real, if humans had actually come for them. Murphy felt his throat tighten with emotion. He told Morrison that they had followed the Kralton for 9 months across 12,000 light-years. They had searched 40 star systems and questioned hundreds of people. They had never stopped looking and never considered giving up. Amy Watson started crying when she saw the rescue team. She had kept her tracking device activated for all these months, never knowing if anyone was following the signal. She had begun to lose hope during the darkest times, when the Kralton guards told her that no one was coming, and humans had forgotten about the Endeavor. Now she knew they had been wrong. Humanity had not forgotten. Murphy's team quickly checked each prisoner for serious injuries and began leading them back to the transport shuttle. Medical teams were waiting on the Relentless to treat them. While the prisoners were being evacuated, Murphy went to the bridge of Thexlar's ship. The Kralton commander sat in his command chair staring at nothing. His pride and confidence had shattered completely. He looked at Murphy with something close to awe and asked the question that was haunting his mind. He could not understand why the humans had pursued them for so long. The attack had killed 35 people and taken 7 prisoners. In the scale of a galaxy with billions of inhabited worlds, these numbers seemed insignificant. Why would an entire fleet spend 9 months chasing raiders across thousands of light years for such a small group of people? Why commit so many resources and so much effort for what the Kralton considered a minor incident? Murphy looked at the defeated alien commander and answered with simple honesty. He said those 42 people were not statistics or numbers. They were humans. They belonged to families and communities. They had names and dreams and people who loved them. When the Kralton attacked the Endeavor, they did not just destroy a ship. They attacked humanity itself. Every human everywhere felt that attack personally. It did not matter if the victims were scientists or soldiers, famous or unknown. They were human, and that was enough. Murphy explained that humans had a quality that made them different from many other species. Humans were loyal to their own beyond all reason and common sense. They would cross the galaxy to save even one person, because that was who they were. Thexlar listened to this explanation and finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. He had thought humans were just another expanding species, no different from dozens of others he had encountered. He had believed that attacking one small research ship would be a simple raid with no consequences. He had been completely wrong. The humans had proven they were willing to pursue their enemies forever, across any distance for any length of time. Thexlar had not attacked a weak species. He had provoked something far more dangerous than he imagined. Commander Price received the report that all prisoners were safely aboard the Relentless and receiving medical care. All 6 Kralton ships were secured, and their crews were in custody. The mission was complete. She allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. 9 months of pursuit had led to this moment. Now it was time to take the Kralton back to human space to face justice, and to show the galaxy what happened when you attacked humanity. The new captain was Jake Morrison, who had recovered from his ordeal and requested to return to space exploration. He understood the risks better than anyone, but he refused to let fear control his life. Standing on the bridge of the new Endeavor, Morrison felt connected to his lost crew members. Their mission would continue. Their work would not be forgotten. Mounted on the bridge wall was a memorial plaque, listing the 35 names of those who had died. Below their names was the phrase that had become humanity's promise to the galaxy: "We remember, we return, we never stop." Commander Helen Price retired from active service 10 years after leading the pursuit mission. She had become one of the most respected figures in human military history. Young officers studied her tactics and her unwavering determination. The pursuit of the Kralton raiders was taught in every military academy as an example of what humanity could accomplish when fully committed to a goal. Price gave occasional lectures and interviews, but she mostly preferred to stay out of the spotlight. When asked about her most famous mission, she always said the same thing. She had simply done what needed to be done. The Kralton had attacked innocent people, and someone had to respond. The fact that it took 9 months and 12,000 light-years did not matter. The distance and time were irrelevant. What mattered was keeping the promise that humanity made to all its people. "We will come for you. We will never forget you. We will pursue those who harm you to the ends of the galaxy." The galaxy learned to respect this promise. Incidents of attacks on human civilian vessels dropped to nearly 0 in the decade following the Endeavor case. Pirates and raiders who operated in the outer regions spread the word among themselves: "Leave human ships alone. The risk was too great. The humans would follow you forever, and eventually they would find you. No matter where you ran or how long you hid, they would keep coming." This reputation for relentless pursuit became one of humanity's greatest assets in the dangerous frontier of space. They did not need the largest fleet or the most powerful weapons. They had something better. They had infinite patience and an unbreakable commitment to justice. 50 years after the attack on the Endeavour, the incident was still taught in schools and remembered in annual ceremonies. New generations of humans grew up knowing the story of the long pursuit and the rescue of the 7 prisoners. The story had become part of human culture, a defining moment that explained who humans were and what they valued. When young people asked why the story mattered so much, the answer was always simple. It showed that humanity would never abandon its own people. No matter how far away they were, no matter how long it took, humans would always come home for their own. This promise gave every explorer, scientist, colonist, and traveler the confidence to venture into unknown space. They knew that if something went wrong, humanity would not forget them. The pursuit would begin, and it would never end until they were found. The journey back to human space took 6 months, but the news traveled much faster. Commander Helen Price made sure of that. At every station, every trading post, every inhabited system they passed through, she broadcast the same message. The Krelton raiders who attacked the human research vessel Endeavour had been captured after a pursuit lasting 9 months and covering over 12,000 light-years. The 7 human prisoners had been recovered alive. Justice was being served. Price did not just send these messages quietly through normal channels. She made sure every species in the region heard about what had happened. She wanted the galaxy to understand something important about humanity. The 7 rescued prisoners recovered slowly during the long voyage home. The medical teams on the Relentless worked around the clock to treat their injuries and help them regain their strength. Captain Jake Morrison spent most of his time in the observation deck, staring at the stars and trying to process everything that had happened. He had spent 9 months believing no one would come for them, that they had been forgotten in the vastness of space. Learning that an entire fleet had pursued them across the galaxy left him struggling with powerful emotions. Amy Watson recovered faster than the others despite her physical weakness. She kept asking to visit the bridge and thank the crew members who had followed her tracking signal. Commander Price allowed these visits and watched as Watson hugged Claire Foster and thanked her for never giving up on the search. When the fleet finally reached Earth orbit, millions of people were waiting. The news of the successful rescue had reached home weeks earlier, and the public response had been overwhelming. The 7 survivors were given a hero's welcome when they stepped off the transport shuttle. Crowds cheered and waved flags. News cameras captured every moment. Government officials made speeches about courage and determination. But the survivors themselves felt strange about being called heroes. They had not done anything heroic. They had simply survived. The real heroes were the people who had come looking for them, who had refused to give up, who had followed their enemies across impossible distances. Amy Watson received special recognition for activating her tracking device and keeping it running during the entire captivity. She was awarded the Medal of Civilian Valor, the highest honor that could be given to someone who was not in the military. During the ceremony, she tried to explain that she had only done what anyone would do in her situation. But Admiral George Patterson, who presented the medal personally, told her she was wrong. Many people would have given up hope. Many would have believed the tracking device was pointless. She had kept faith that humanity would come, and that faith had helped guide the rescue fleet to the right location. Her courage had mattered. A memorial service was held for the 35 crew members who died when the Krelton attacked the Endeavour. The service took place at the Space Exploration Memorial in Washington, and people attended both in person and through holographic projection from colonies across human space. Each name was read aloud and honored. Dr. Lisa Hayes, who had tried to protect her research team. Engineer Paul Chen, who had sealed a bulkhead to save others. All 35 were remembered not just as victims but as explorers and scientists who had been doing important work when violence took them away. A new monument was unveiled with all their names engraved in stone. Below the names was a simple inscription that would become famous throughout human space. We remember. We return. The captured Krelton raiders faced trial under human law. The proceedings were broadcast publicly, so everyone could see justice being done. Thexlar and his command officers were charged with multiple counts of murder, assault, kidnapping, and piracy. The evidence was overwhelming. The black box recordings from the Endeavour showed everything. The testimony from the survivors confirmed the brutality of the attack and the months of captivity. Thexelar's own words, recorded during his conversations with Commander Price, proved his intentions and his complete lack of remorse. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The verdict was unanimous. Thexelar and 15 of his senior officers were sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. They would spend the rest of their lives in a secure facility on a remote prison colony. The remaining Kralton crew members received shorter sentences based on their level of involvement in the attack. But the legal proceedings were not the most important outcome of the mission. What mattered more were the ripples spreading across the galaxy. Other species were watching and learning. The humans had demonstrated something that changed how they were perceived throughout known space. They had shown they possessed not just advanced technology and strong ships, but something far more dangerous. They had unlimited patience and an unwavering commitment to protecting their own people. The concept was difficult for many alien species to understand. Most civilizations in the galaxy were practical and logical. They calculated costs and benefits. They made decisions based on efficiency and resources. If something was too expensive or took too long, they abandoned it and moved on. Humans operated on different principles. They did not abandon their people. They did not calculate whether a rescue mission was cost-effective. They simply acted on the belief that every human life had infinite value. This made them unpredictable and frankly terrifying to species that had built their cultures on practical calculations. The Kralton had learned this lesson the hard way, and now their story was spreading across space. Traders, merchants, diplomats, and military commanders from dozens of species were updating their databases and protocols regarding humans. The new information all said essentially the same thing. Do not attack humans. Do not harm their civilians. Do not assume distance or time will protect you from their response. The Long-Range Pursuit Division expanded significantly in the years following the Endeavour mission. Hundreds of new volunteers applied to join, inspired by what Commander Price and her crews had accomplished. The division's headquarters displayed the motto prominently: "We remember, we return." New pursuit ships were constructed and deployed to patrol the edges of human space. Their presence served as a constant reminder to potential raiders and pirates. If you attacked humans, these ships would come for you. They would follow you across the galaxy if necessary. They would never stop until justice was done. 5 years after the incident, Lieutenant Kyle Murphy had been promoted to captain and commanded his own pursuit vessel called the Perseverance. He was on routine patrol near the outer colonies when his sensors detected a group of Kralton trading ships. Murphy's crew went to alert status, but the Kralton vessels immediately transmitted messages of peaceful intent. They altered their course to give the human ship plenty of space. They sent assurances that they were legitimate merchants conducting legal business. Murphy allowed them to pass without interference, but filed a report noting their respectful behavior. The lesson had clearly been learned. The Kralton who encountered human ships now went out of their way to avoid any hint of aggression or threat. Other species also changed their behavior around humans. The Vexor merchants who had helped the pursuit fleet by providing information were rewarded with favorable trade agreements. Species that had previously been neutral or slightly hostile toward human expansion began seeking diplomatic relationships instead. No one wanted to be on the wrong side of a species that would pursue its enemies forever. The practical calculation was simple. Humans made good friends and terrible enemies. It was much better to be in the first category than the second. Back on Earth, the wreckage of the Endeavour was eventually recovered from the Kepler sector. The twisted metal and broken systems were brought home with great ceremony. Admiral Patterson proposed using parts of the original ship to build a new research vessel with the same name. The idea was approved unanimously. The new Endeavour was constructed using some of the recovered materials combined with the latest technology. The ship was designed to continue the exploration and research work that had been interrupted by violence. When the new Endeavour launched 3 years after the original was destroyed, her crew included children and relatives of those who had died in the attack.